Father, I want to thank you. Thank you again. But I always kind of look for what to say. Thank you just always seems fitting.
Amen.
But then it always seems fitting, but it never seems enough. I could go on for hours and hours and how grateful I am for you. But I pray that tonight really emphasizes my gratefulness. Father, I pray that the word, whatever is to be spoken, is your word and how you want it to be spoken. That I'm nothing more than just a vessel of you.
Amen.
So Father, I pray for each of these brothers and sisters, each one of these men and women that are here tonight, that they have the ears to hear. And they receive what they hear. And by your name. Amen. Amen. I was reading this week in Leviticus. I don't know why. Maybe it was like a tattoo thing kind of jumps out. Sometimes I dabble in that book. But what jumped out to me was in chapter 19, verse 18. Writes, "Do not take revenge or bear a grudge against the members of your community, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord." Love your neighbor as yourself. Paul writes in Romans 13, he writes, "Do not owe anyone anything except to love one another. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. The commandments: do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not covet, and any other commandment are summed up by this commandment: love your neighbor as yourself." Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. Over and over again. Over and over and over again. Now Jesus teaches about this. Right? Jesus teaches about this in Luke. He teaches chapter 6 verse 27. "But I say to you who listen, love your enemies. Do what is good to those who hate you. Love your neighbor as yourself." Love your enemies.
Come on.
Right? We know the two big commandments. The two big ones. Right? The two big ones, he says, "I hang every other law unto these two. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the greatest and most important command. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets depend on these two commandments." Love God, love your neighbor. Right? We wound a little bit, man. That's Sermon on the Mount. Where do I start, Pastor Will? Start the Sermon on the Mount. In verse 43. Chapter 5 of Matthew. He writes, "You have heard it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies." Right? You're getting the theme right now. You get the theme right now. You ever hear that one saying? If the shoe fits, wear it. Right? You ever hear that saying? If the shoe fits, wear it. How about that other saying? Right? There's a couple of them, right? Walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, must be a duck. Right? If you see smoke, there's a fire. Right? And this is kind of like my favorite. Ready? Whoever smelt it, dealt it. You know what I mean? Right? But you hear those sayings. You hear those sayings. Right? And those sayings, right, are used to say that something is said or suggested about a person is true, and that the person should accept it as true. Right? I'll tell you something. I have 4 kids, 3 little girls, and 10, 6, 4, year and a half. That's my son, year and a half. My 4-year-old, one of her favorite shows, one of her favorite movies is Monster Inc. Yeah, they have like 4 of them now. Yeah, but Monsters Inc. And I remember her loving. I mean, I even got her a 4-foot Solly one year for Christmas. You know, but she would watch these monsters on TV, these fictional characters. You know, and I never forget. She would go to bed at night. She'd always ask me, "Daddy, can you look under the bed?" You know, I don't know if the monsters are hiding in the bed, under the bed. Or even like something on Monsters Inc. They have the doors, like the closet doors. This is how these monsters in this cartoon go into the kids' rooms to scare them, go through the closet doors. Well, Juliana used to make me go in her room and make sure her door, or closet door, was closed every night. That way the monsters didn't come through into her room. This kind of hit me this week when I'm reading this. And I thought about this story with my daughter. And that in my sobriety and recovery, you know, I stopped having to look under the bed for the monster when I realized that the monster was inside of me the whole time. You know? And I realized that monster was right here. You know, one thing about recovery, one thing about this is that nobody's really coming to you to rescue you. And you have to rescue yourself. You know? The enemies aren't 1, 2, and 3. The enemies aren't your mom. The enemies aren't the cops who pulled you over that night. The enemies isn't the chief of police who's keeping you in jail. The enemies isn't the fines that you have to pay. The enemy's not the girlfriend who cheated on you. The enemy's not society. The enemy's not all that stuff. The enemy's within. And that's where the real enemy is. You know, we go into this resource here, right? And last time I got to preach, last time we talked about the enemy. We talked about the problem, right? Selfishness, self-centeredness. That, as we think, is the root of our troubles, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Our troubles, we think, we're basically of our own making. Right? They arise out of ourselves. In this case of self-will run riot. That's why when we're praying, we're making a decision to surrender our life to the care of God. We're asking to be released from that bondage of self. So that's the thing. That's the thing, church. That's the thing, brothers and sisters. To love thy neighbor as yourself. And to love your enemies. That's the story here.
Amen.
That's the story here. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is the greatest gift you can give yourself. Beyond anything. Beyond any other gift. Anything you can do for yourself. Forgiveness is the key. Forgiveness doesn't change the past. But forgiveness changes the future.
Talking about sayings. That saying, you are your own worst enemy. If you're supposed to love your enemies, you gotta love yourself.
In the 12 and 12. In 12 and 12, on page 99, it says, "For it is by self-forgetting that one finds. It is by forgiving that one is forgiven. It is by dying that one is awakened to eternal life." Amen. Forgiveness. Forgiveness starts from within. Now I want to read, but I want to paint a picture. Jesus. Right? Jesus is returning to Jerusalem. In Mark 11, this is his triumphant entry back into Jerusalem. Right? This is the beginning of the end. They call this the Holy Week. Right? When he rides in on the donkey back into town. These are the final days. They even call it Palm Sunday. Right? It's the day that he rides back in. So on this journey back in, there's this fig tree. Right? He rides back in, he sees the fig trees with some of his disciples. And the fig tree is barren. There's no fruit on it. Right? Nothing on the tree. The tree's not producing fruit. It is barren. So he curses the tree. Right? He curses the tree. And he says, may no one ever eat fruit from you again. After he curses the tree, he goes into the temple, turns over the tables. Right? He goes in there and corrects all the corruption. He corrects with the Sadducees and the Pharisees how they've defiled the temple. They defiled what is holy. But after he's done with that, thank you. After he's done with that, he comes back out and he sees that fig tree. Early in the morning, as they were passing by, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots up. Then Peter remembered and said to him, Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed has withered. Jesus replied to them, have faith in God. Truly I tell you, if anyone says to the mountain, be lifted up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will happen, it will be done for him. Therefore I tell you, everything you pray and ask for, believe that you have received, and it will be yours. And whenever you stand praying, and if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, so that your Father in heaven will also forgive you for your wrongdoing. And whenever you stand, pray. If you have anything against anyone, forgive him, so that your Father in heaven will also forgive you for your wrongdoing. Now, I've read this story 100 times. I've heard fantastic preachers preach this story. But as I sat down and I broke this down, it kind of hit me. Right? In this lesson that he's teaching the parables, he says, right, tell your mountains to be lifted up and cast them into the sea. That sounds like such a huge task. Right? Tell your mountains, those mountains that are standing in your way, to be lifted up and thrown into the sea. Followed right up by a lesson in forgiveness. What is your biggest mountain that's in your life right now? Forgiveness! Forgiveness is the biggest mountain that you're facing in your life right now. And what Jesus is teaching them that in this parable, in this lesson of that fig tree, to lift up that mountain, because he's going to toss it out into the sea. And if you pray on it and you believe in it, it will be done. And right, we just identify what's the biggest thing for you to forgive. The hardest thing for you to forgive is that man that's looking back at you in the mirror. The hardest thing for you to get over and get past is that monster that's underneath that bed. See, my brothers and sisters, that's the problem. That's the issue, right? The issue is us. We are the problem. All that other stuff we filled in the blank with is just the coping mechanism. The drugs, the alcohol, the 6 packets of Oreos that's used to fill, or that $6 million in scratches you paid off in a year, right? Or whatever it is. Man, that's just a coping mechanism for the real problem. The real problem is focusing on us and that selfishness, right? Yes. So getting back into it, getting back into the solution, man, we need to forgive ourselves. That's what we need to do.
Hallelujah.
Put the bat down. Quit beating yourself up so much. Forgiveness. That big mountain that's standing in our way to a happy and peaceful and joyful life is us. We're standing in our own way. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it changes the future. We can't go back in time and undo all them things that we've done. And I know getting at this point, in this stage in the game, we would want to. Okay? Those people who would say all the time, I want to go back and change anything. I would do it all the same exact way. Believe me. I would go back and probably about after my first DUI, I wouldn't have got 2 more. I wouldn't have caught that drug charge then after that as well. You know? There's things I would have done in my life not the exact same way. We all have those regrettable things.
Yes.
We all have that pain.
Yes.
We can't go back and change that. All we can do is go forward. And we can change it. We can change the trajectory of our life from here on out. If we can get through that mountain that's standing in our way.
Thank you.
The past doesn't have power on the present. One thing about forgiveness is it doesn't let off the offender, it sets free the offended. Right? It doesn't let us off the hook. It doesn't let those people off the hook. It doesn't let everything that happened off the hook, but it sets you free from it. That's what it's teaching us. That's the lesson.
Yes.
That's what he's trying to teach you about this fig tree and why it was withered and what the point of it was. That's why he's emphasizing the necessity and the importance of it. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. I wrote down that you either get better or you either get bitter. Right? Change a little. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Get better or you get bitter. Right? And to refuse to forgive another is to forfeit forgiveness for ourselves. There's something else in the first letter of John that I just couldn't leave out. Just couldn't. He writes, "For this is the message you have heard from the beginning. We should love one another." He goes on to say, "This is how we have come to know love. He laid down His life for us. We should also lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has this world's goods and sees a fellow believer in need, but withholds compassion for him, how does God's love reside in him? Little children, let us not love in word or speech, but in action and in truth. This is how we know we belong to the truth, and will reassure our hearts before Him whenever our hearts condemn us. For God is greater than our hearts, and He knows all things. Dear friends, if our hearts don't condemn us, we have confidence before God and receive whatever we ask from Him because we keep His commands and do what is pleasing in His sight. Now this is His command, that we believe in the name of His Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another as He commanded us. The one who keeps His commands remains in Him, and He in Him. And the way we know that He remains in us is from the Spirit He has given us. Man, that's a lot. This is what we're going to do tonight. This is what we're going to do tonight. We're going to search our hearts. We're going to search our hearts for those things that are condemning us. We're going to search our hearts from the things that we feel that we did that are unforgivable. We're going to search our hearts for those things that are separating us from Him. We're going to search our hearts for those things that are preventing for us to live out that joyous, free, peaceful, loving life like we are commanded to do. We're going to search our hearts from that thing that is saying we are unable to love thy neighbor as thyself. We're going to search our hearts for those things that are preventing us to love our enemies. We're going to search those in our hearts. And then we're going to reassure our hearts before Him, for the presence of His Spirit which resides in each and every one of us, that is sitting right there beside Him in that empty seat, sitting back chilling.
Amen.
Smiling, ear to ear. And we all came here tonight to glorify Him. Forgiveness is not seeking something. Forgiveness is not something that happens to us, but is what happens through us. And when God gave me this vision, He gave me this vision 3 years ago about a recovery church and what the mission of it is. It's not a normal church. This church was never intended to have this big, glorious building outside of Ridgewood with a big recovery church logo on the front of it. It was never meant so that, you know what I mean, I could have mailers every month. This church was meant to be a church that was in people's homes, that was in the streets, that was in the sore places on this planet that people were scared to go to. This church was meant to reach those people that were struggling, that were hurting, that were looking for the answer, that they were looking from a way out of that pit. This church was meant to be that hand that comes right out there and says, bro, I got you.
Amen.
Follow me. This church was meant for that. This church was meant that when people came, that they left differently than when they came. That people left here transformed. They left here feeling that 3,000-pound weight lifted from their shoulders. I can guarantee you that can happen tonight. Right now. At this exact moment. I guarantee you it can happen in your life, 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 in your life. I can guarantee each and every one of you, I can guarantee right now, at this exact moment, that things can change. That burden can be lifted. It really comes down to one thing. Willingness. Willingness. I said a little earlier, put the bat down. Alright, quit beating yourself up so much. Put the bat down. You have to put the bat down. Nobody can put the bat down for you. So one of these things that we do, we have these surrender crosses. You know? And these surrender crosses are meant, they're intended for just that. If you're ready to put the bat down, if you're ready to forgive yourself, if you're ready to move on from this point A to point B. So we have surrender crosses. A couple people are going to have some. In case you need somebody to pray with. You know? In case you need somebody to pray with. Maybe you just need a hug. Maybe you need somebody to just pat you on your back and say, hey man, it's going to be okay. That's why we're here. That's why Recovery Church is here. So I'm going to put on a praise and worship song and just dedicate this time for prayer and worship and praise. You know, however long we want to go, however long we want to pray, however long we maybe just want to praise and worship, however long, I'm going to put a hand on that. But I love to lay out challenges. This is where I'm challenging you. Don't leave here the same that you can. Keep your difficulties.